What's up guys, my name is Ace, and I've got yet another Modern Warfare 4 video with all of the Kill Block Alpha gameplay coming out over the weekend, with several content creators being able to stream gameplay for us. And one thing I wanted to hone in on today is specifically the muzzle smoke effect, and how they've actually already made adjustments to this after the first day based on feedback. I haven't really seen anybody do a proper before and after comparison here, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Just a quick recap, after the first day where we saw our first initial streams and gameplay of this, the first thing is they rolled out a fix for the bug suppressor on the 1MAR9 build that they had in the game, and they already showed before and after with this. But that is more so showing a bug fix that took place, and it just applied to that gun with that specific attachment combination. However, the more important part here is they said, additionally, they have reduced muzzle smoke opacity for all weapons for this weekend's preview session. So in that build of the game, from that point on, we also saw a reduction to the opacity to muzzle smoke for all of the guns. And that's really what we're going to be honing in on in today's video with a proper before and after comparison here. I mean, just watching the gameplay in the first day compared to the second day, if you were really paying attention to that muzzle smoke, it was quite clear that they made an adjustment here. But I wanted to show just how much of a change this was. And I did want to make sure this is the best comparison you could reasonably put together just based on the limited gameplay we've have access to so far. So I wanted to make sure I was at least looking at the exact same gun with the same attachments, and I tried to account for similar lighting conditions as well, since that has a huge impact on how visible that smoke is going to be. But obviously, we do have limitations there. I don't have access to the game with private matches, for instance, to do perfect side-by-side comparisons here. But you'll still see here, it's a very noticeable difference. So in these first few clips here that I'm going to be playing from T-Dog, this is pre-patch. This is from the first day of the event before they reduced the opacity. And while watching these clips, you can definitely see that masking take place in the center of the screen, which is great. That is one key adjustment they've highlighted that they've made for Modern Warfare 4, is they sort of cut a hole in the center of the smoke for you to be able to at least see your sight picture quite well. And that was definitely a welcome change. However, around the edges of your gun, there is still a lot of smoke, and depending on the lighting conditions, it can be very bright, and it can have kind of a strobing effect with full auto guns, because it's not something that like slowly builds up over time as you continue firing. Instead, one frame there'll be no smoke at all. The next frame, when your gun fires, you'll see like a big flash of smoke in front of the screen, and then a frame or two later, you're back down to basically no smoke or very little smoke until the next shot fired. And with that repetition, it kind of strobes in your face a little bit, to a degree. I'm not going to act like it's literally a flashbang going off in your eyes every time, but it is still a clear distraction on your screen, and it can also obstruct what's going on around your gun. So if you are dealing with multiple enemies that are close together, sure, you'll see the enemy you're shooting at just fine, but the other one on your screen you might lose sight of due to how thick this muzzle smoke can be. So now let's have a look at this using the exact same gun and attachment combination. So this is the NIX 58, and this is coming from Joe after the patch. And as we can see here, watching these clips, there is significantly less muzzle smoke. It's still there. There's still a little bit present. So it doesn't look like you're firing an airsoft gun or anything. Like there's still some muzzle smoke there. It's just not nearly as distracting. And that strobing effect is essentially non-existent now. And even if I freeze frame on some of the worst frames here post-patch, it's really not that bad. If you had an enemy right behind that muzzle smoke, you'd still be able to see them just fine. Whereas pre-patch, if I take some of the worst screenshots, there are definitely areas on your screen where if there were an enemy in the right spots, you'd potentially have some issues spotting and tracking them properly. And I grabbed a couple extra pre-patch examples here as well, using different guns, so this isn't going to be a direct comparison with the same gun, pre-patch versus post-patch, but I just wanted to show some situations here where you can see a lot of that muzzle smoke taking over the center areas of your screen outside of your immediate sight picture, of course. And so after seeing all of this and watching a whole lot of gameplay post-patch, I think this was a great adjustment. I'm quite happy with the current level of muzzle smoke here, where it's there, you can see it. For those that want that little bit of immersion, you want there to actually be muzzle smoke, so it's not like you're shooting an airsoft gun. But at the same time, I never really see it as being an obstruction, and there's no more of that distracting strobing effect as well, where even if it's not technically blocking things that you can see, it's just kind of flashing in your eyes, causing some unnecessary distraction while in a gunfight. And I know many people see this as such a minor thing, and it is a fairly small detail here, but these little details make a big difference, and they can really add up over time. This was one of the biggest complaints back in Modern Warfare 2, was the fact that that muzzle smoke was just way too much, And so I was a bit surprised to see when we first saw gameplay that they didn't take care of that issue entirely. But I think in their eyes, the way they saw it is they added that masking effect. And I think in their eyes, that was sort of problem solved. Now you can see what you're shooting at. The muzzle smoke is not blocking that, but that only solved part of the issue, and that is your immediate sight picture. That wasn't the entire problem with this. A big part of it is that strobing effect and just the fact that it is quite distracting when that muzzle smoke is quite high, even if it's not directly in your sight picture. And so they did make that adjustment, and I'm really happy they did. I hope this is what we stick with going forward, and they don't end up reverting this once we get into hopefully a public alpha of the game for Gunfight or Kill Block. I'm really hoping we're going to see that, or if not, then the beta. So time will have to tell on that, but I'm really happy with that. However, there is still that other element that a lot of people have been talking about when it comes to visual recoil that doesn't have anything to do with the muzzle smoke. It's more how much the gun is jumping around in your hands, as well as how much the screen is shaking. And we're talking about movement with those things that are independent from the actual recoil itself. And I know that's something many people confuse when talking about this, but this is the unnecessary amount of movement that isn't tracking with the actual recoil. For many, this is still too high. After watching a bunch of gameplay with even more weapons present, and also with the new toned down muzzle smoke, it's definitely not an issue with all of the guns I was seeing throughout this. In fact, many of them seem just fine in this department, in my opinion. But with some of them, they do seem pretty bad. And I think a big thing to consider here is the fact that this is a gunfight mode, so the attachment selection is all predetermined. And perhaps some of these builds are just set up in a way where you're going to see a lot of this. Whereas if you were to just swap out a few attachments, it would solve that issue and there'd be a clear trade-off and downside there. So I do think this is probably an area where we need to get our hands on the actual beta for the game where we can customize our classes a little bit. And I think that's where I plan on diving deeper into this topic before pushing too hard for any changes to this. I still think it looks a little too high on some of the guns. But again, that might just be an attachment thing. So time will tell on that. And then one last thing I noticed while I was going through this and specifically looking for muzzle smoke, I also picked up on the fact that when getting shot, there's often like a big cloud of blood that appears in front of your face. And this isn't to be confused with the red that appears on your screen, but this is actually in the world itself. There's this cloud of blood that will appear in front of you. And especially when you watch it in slow motion, that is a crazy amount of blood. And I just feel like this is one of those things where if they keep it like this, it will probably become an annoyance and be just one of those things that the community pushes back against over time. Like, I'll admit, I didn't notice this right away while just watching gameplay at full speed. But now that I know it's there, I know that I'm going to continue seeing this all the time now when in gunfights. And I do think it's probably going to get on my nerves quite a bit because just like with the unnecessary level of muzzle smoke we had, this is an unnecessary amount of blood that we have in front of your screen while being shot. In fact, I have my doubts that this is actually working as expected. Like, usually you see this little blood cloud when shooting other players, and I don't mind that at all because it just gives you that little extra level of an indicator that you've hit that target and dealt damage to them. But I think that's the type of thing that should only be showing up when looking at other players in a third-person view rather than your own blood from a first-person view. So again, a fairly minor detail, but these little details do add up over time, and so I hope this is an area they'll be taking a look at as well. And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Now that you've seen some pre-patch versus post-patch comparisons with that muzzle smoke, how are you feeling about it? Do you feel like that was a good change that they made there and that muzzle smoke is very appropriate now? Do you think maybe they need to take it even further, or do you think they didn't need to make this change at all? And then additionally, just on that side note, how are you feeling about that blood effect I showed off? Do you guys think that should look like that, or perhaps not? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.